Welcome back to No Permission Necessary. We are talking today about being unseen by the people who have known you the longest, like giving everyone permission to step into whatever their identity is when your old family identity keeps kind of replaying for the other members of the family. And so let me explain a little bit. When I was preparing for this episode, I thought a lot about early recovery, honestly, just because I feel like when one person starts getting well,
Mhm.
we really start highlighting how the system maybe needs to change.
Yes.
That definitely showed up. However, I feel like I'm going through a little bit of this right now, but it's different because I feel like when I stepped into my identity as a mother, and this happens a lot with the clients that I serve, like when you become a parent, your family system stuff gets highlighted in a different way as well. And you start making choices of how you want to show up in your role in the family because, sometimes you can't continue operating in the same way when you're trying to do something different, break some of those generational trauma bonds and, you know, all that stuff.
There's a couple things that I think are important to mention. One is when you're first entering recovery and you have been historically the problem, as I was, and as Jill was, I'll speak for her. It is confusing for people to be able to coexist with you when you're in a different space. I think that it plays on their stuff. It plays on, not knowing, not trusting. They haven't really forgiven. There's still a lot of resentment and chaos. And so there's this kind of displaced challenge in both sides where when you have a loved one that gets well or starts to get sober or starts to be put in recovery in any form, whatever recovery they're entering, the natural desire is to want to go spend time with that person. You're like, oh, well, now I can go spend time. I don't want to be at a distance from them. I want to be connected to them. But what happens is if both people haven't done their own process or their own journey, that stuff really shows up even more glaring because now there's nothing to blame, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's still the past events and the past like ruptures and, the lying and the deception and the deceit and all that good stuff, but well, not good, all that bad stuff. But there's not that act going on currently. And so I really based on my own experience, I think the biggest struggle was I was starting to feel better about myself. And then when I was coming around my family, I actually felt worse. So I liked to stay in this like recovery bubble that I was in because it made me feel more comfortable, more confident. When I would get around my family, I would feel like, oh, my confidence would drop or my flaws would be shining through or my confidence would start to kind of waver, So I just feel like there's such a confusion, I guess is the best word, around how you show up with your family when you're going through some level of a transition, whether that's into recovery or maybe changing from being a child to then being a young adult to then being a married adult to then being a mother or father. Those are all really tough transitions, really for
In
the
a system.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially if I just think about the culture of a family, and every family has one, whatever that culture is, right? And so if we look at what that is and you are stepping into your own identity, whether it's part of one of those natural transitions or maybe, you know, where I see this a lot, honestly, is in somebody's health journey. So I feel like sobriety is one of those things, but let's just say that, you start into a health journey and you're eating differently. You're prioritizing your sleep. You're saying no to certain things like drinking. I mean, even if you're not sober, I feel like there
Mm.
is a big movement around people saying no to drinking for health reasons. And that's not always, like your family hasn't met that new you yet. They're not used to that. So they don't know what to do. And especially when I was doing recovery, I remember being around some family members or friends who they were uncomfortable and a little threatened by my sobriety because then it highlighted their drinking in their minds, not for me, but for them, they had to take a different look at that. And I also think that when you step into this new role, it's a little lonely when you have to be the one setting the boundaries. And I'll give an example. I got sober right before the holidays. And so I had to do a lot of thinking about how I was going to show up for the holidays, what that was going to look like. And I set some pretty firm boundaries around the time that I was willing to spend in certain situations, just because drinking's a big part of my family's culture. I think most families' cultures, especially around holidays. Although the older I've gotten and the more sober I've gotten, I've realized that that's actually not true. Like some families, they don't drink at all on the holidays. Highlight, right? And so when you talk about why it's lonely, it's like, well, I had to be the one to set the boundary because it was me that was changing my behaviors, right? So I had to say no. And I also think that was difficult for my family because, on the one hand, they want to be supportive. But on the other hand, you have to think about, I haven't been at previous holidays because I was active. I wasn't able to show up, right? So your family wants to like show off that you're healthier now and like you're able to be part of the family and all this stuff. But it's like reconciling what's best for you and your new identity that you're showing up for. And like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes when we start setting boundaries, we're breaking down some of those old patterns. Because when you're a child or, you're in a family system, sometimes you get in the role of just being like, yeah, I'll do that to appease everyone in the family, to make everyone happy. Like, I'll do that. And sometimes when you start stepping into the new part of you, you're like, no, I can't do that. And that's tough sometimes to hear.
I was having a conversation earlier in the week with a family, and a lot of what we talk about is how one has to prioritize while also validating that someone else's feelings matter and that the connections are yearning to be repaired. And so, the best example I have around that was that early on in my recovery, I worked in the restaurant industry because it was good money and I could work a couple nights and still, practice my recovery during the day or in the evenings or whatever it was and, hit all my groups and meetings. And if you've ever worked in the restaurant industry, you know that like the holidays are a big deal. So the holiday before the holiday, the days leading up to the holiday for different, corporate parties and work parties and, family get togethers. And I was in a position where I didn't really have the resources to just be able to come and go and like leave my job when I was fully responsible for my own financial security. But there was this really like tough position that I was in because my mom specifically, I think my dad too, but my mom specifically, I remember having a conversation with her and she'd be like, "Are you coming home?" And I'd be like, "I can't." And it was the first time I had to like say no while also knowing that it was gonna be hard for her, and it wasn't necessarily something that I really wanted to do. Like, I did wanna go home, but not sacrificing because historically, I would sacrifice and say, "Okay, I'll make it work, and I'll tell work I can't work, and then I'll come up." But that would have been putting a financial strain on my ability to, at the time, maybe make rent or pay my cell phone bill or whatever, like, few bills I had. But those few bills were my livelihood, Like, if I didn't have those, I was in big if I didn't have money to make those bills, I was in big trouble. And so I think what happens is parallel to people being able to reassign kind of their role in the family and maybe shy away from being the people pleaser or being the person who's like overly kind of controlling around certain things or absent in certain ways, like whatever role kind of they've played throughout their life. I think the biggest thing for me was that as I started to get well, my confidence started to raise and I was able to handle the letdown. I think the reason why people don't want to say the hard thing or make the subtle shift is because they feel like they can't handle the letdown of the other person. So they're willing to say, I'm going to let myself down to preserve the relationship. And
Yeah.
that really becomes disproportionate and really becomes challenging if you want to have a relationship that is reciprocal, built on transparency, and lacks resentment.
Yeah. I've had a recent conversation with somebody about this where it was very apparent after talking this through that there needed to be some really tough conversations with the family member. And what it boiled down to is I don't want to upset them. And that was, which is kind of what you're saying, right? Like, the pattern is I sacrifice myself, then I get resentful, right? Like, that's like a whole cycle, especially if
Totally.
you're an alcoholic or an addict in recovery or not. But this plays out in so many forms. And so I would I would couch that under some sort of people pleasing behavior, but also it's conflict avoidance, right? It's like, because especially in a family system, you know the fallout from that. And I think that we all make calculated decisions on when we lay on the sword for the good of like keeping the peace. I
Uh-huh.
think we all make those decisions regardless if you're a people pleaser or not. Like, that's just part of being in relationship with people sometimes. Like, there is sacrifice in relationship, right? And so there are times, despite whatever your best boundary, you're like, I'm going to do this thing because it's just like easier to do it. But when you repeatedly do that and abandon yourself, that's when it becomes a problem, because now the other person may not even know that you're kind of abandoning your own boundaries or yourself in this process. Like,
Uh-huh.
they may think you want to be doing this, or like you're
Uh-huh.
all on board and you're all on the same page. And so when we really sit with ourselves to say, what is the thing that's bothering me? And you kind of unpack the layers. When we're not being honest with those people in our lives about, well, this is how I want to show up now, and this is what it requires in our relationship. And I've had to have those tough conversations since becoming a parent. I feel like that's been the next layer of like the identity transition for me. And that continues with all the things on my plate. But what we came to with this conversation that I had with this person is like, you got to sit down and have this tough conversation. The problem is, and we had to kind of walk this through, sometimes the other person's going to see it differently and they're not going to be on the same page with how you want to kind of show up in the world. And then what?
Well, I mean, I've had this general rule, I guess, or guiding principle, I think is a better word, that I can still accept people for where they are, even if it doesn't align with what I think. I mean, essentially, I mean, I think that's everything that recovery talks to us about and speaks to. So that applies not only in a family system, but also in a work system, also in a friend group, that it's okay if they don't align, right? Like I can still make my decision. And I'm not talking about a misalignment in values, right? Like then you're probably, that's a different subject. But I can say, okay, this is their stuff, right? It's not mine. Like I can make my peace with it. And I mean, I can say that I feel like I did everything in my capacity to make that person feel included. And if they're still not feeling included, then maybe that's something that they need to look at independently. You know, like I own my part, I take care of my actions, I try to look around all sides to ensure that I did that. And if I haven't been able to do that, apologize naturally. But if I have been able to do that, then if there's some sort of like feeling or stuck feeling in the relationship or feeling like there's a misalignment, then at that point, it really is for the other person to kind of look around their own area. I mean,
And yeah, and there's going to be natural consequences to that. So I guess you can't argue someone into seeing you differently. I think if you're trying to show up differently, you're trying to change the dynamic, whether it's in a relationship or really it's just the boundary. So, like, something that comes up for me is like what I'm willing to do or not do with the busy schedule of my own family. So, like, my core immediate family, my husband and my children, right? So once the kids started getting into activities and they're what they want to do now, like they're not just little children that I can cart everywhere that things I want to do. Like, they have their own voice and interest now too. And, my husband and I made a decision that like this is what matters the most. So like this is the North
mhm,
Star, like this is what we do. And so that means that they get a voice in what the priorities are for the family, including whether we show up for family events sometimes, right? Like sometimes they're not sometimes, most of the time, there is competing priorities that we have to choose what we are going to do at any given time. And growing up, being at the family event, that's like you're there. You don't say no to that. You show up for that. Like, If there's something else going on, you don't do that thing, right? But to some extent, like I played travel sports and we had stuff that was our priority too. So to some extent, growing up, I'm sure my parents said no to things growing up, but still, it's been a process to be able to say, no, we're not doing that thing, especially if the reason is just simply we don't want to. Like if there's no other reason besides it's been a long week, we've been out of the house every day, like we really just want to stay at the house and like must be nice. There's a response, you know? I mean,
Yeah, and that's
yeah, it is nice
okay.
to make a choice, and that's
Right.
fine. I think you
Right.
can't
Right.
argue with someone seeing it differently on their end. That's where it becomes no longer, if I'm doing it in a respectful way, I've kind of laid this out, this is my boundary. I just have to keep showing up and being consistent in that messaging and like what I'm doing. I don't have to continue beating it into somebody that like this is how it is now. A great example is my aunt this week or the past few weeks when I'm crowned as I guess the family scheduler. Like I'm the one that has to make sure everyone knows every single game, location of every game, which if you're a parent with children in sports at this point, that's like 5 different dates and locations at a minimum every week.
Mhm. Mhm.
I shared the link to the app with everything on there. If you didn't download it and get the schedule, like that's kind of where it ends for me. Like I was sending them out at one point, but what happened is it set up this expectation that I was going to do it every week. So then when it wasn't done, twice in the last month, I've gotten reamed out. Well, I would have been here if, and it's so important to me. If it's so important to you, then it sounds like there needs to be a change in your behavior because I'm doing all I can do and I don't know what else I can do. I've shared the link. I have a few things going on, few balls that I'm juggling. So
Yeah,
like
but I think that that's the deal because I feel like we have been able to relate on this so much. I have historically been a planner. I still am a planner to a very large extent, but obviously now it involves my own kids. A-
yeah,
But there's still this expectation, talk about family roles. There is still this expectation that I'm going to coordinate everything, which to be fair, I kind of set myself up for that because I always did it. And now I'm trying to kind of like back out a little bit and like, okay, pass the baton. Someone else can like take some initiative here too. And
then how's that working for you?
it's not going well
For you or for everybody
for
else?
everybody and me. For all of us, honestly. I
Well,
mean,
I can imagine that the part that's not going well for you is they're not doing it as well as you do it. So like then you're having problems with the outcome.
but yes, of course, naturally. But I also, it is a little bit in my DNA. So it is unwinding my own role too. Like I don't necessarily need to put that pressure on anybody else other than myself. And I think maybe it means more proactive conversation. It means talking about it before maybe something, before we're getting together. Um, Acknowledging bandwidth, a lot of things in that regard, right? Like acknowledging what I have to give, what I don't have to give. But when you are roughly 5 years old and you are calling around your family members on the landline in the kitchen to plan and let them know that you're making a dinner reservation for everybody, I'm not sure
It's
I'm able to
just
back out of the role. Like
I
that
mean,
truly was me in my essence. I mean, coordinating everything from talent shows to get togethers. And now I will tell you, Bodhi has got that gene because he will now talk about transitions. Okay. Going back to our initial topic, I had to put the chime on the door because now he's out. He's just out. He has gone to the neighbors. He is going to orchestrate his own play date. He has
yeah.
no interest in me doing it for him. And he's ready to party. He is ready to,
I
and
mean,
now
speaking
he's
of
calling on
party,
the landline. Now he's calling on the landline, not on Fridays. Like, I don't know if he just always like subconsciously knows Fridays, like going into the weekend or whatever. He'll call Sam on the landline and say, Dad, we're going out to dinner tonight. I'll see you when you get home, and hang up the phone. And then comes to me and then says, Dad said we're going out to dinner.
well, That might be a little bit more manipulation.
I know, but I think he's like, "Oh, yeah, dad said yes." It's not like he's intentionally trying to
Oh.
manipulate me. He's just like, "This is what we're doing, and I'm excited about it."
Well, I mean, my daughter just planned her entire birthday party.
Okay, so
I
she's now taking the baton. Do you think we should warn them? Do you think that we should warn them?
I don't think it's so much about the role, right? I think it's about when we choose, because I think there's times in our lives where, which is where we're at right now, we can't continue this role and keep our sanity. Like we can't do both because we're already holding all of the like all of these things for our own family system. We can't then coordinate the full family system, right? And I think it's more about not needing them to understand
Yes, I would
when
agree.
we set the boundary,
Sure.
right? So when when people in our lives, particularly family, because that's when I think it's the hardest, when we're not being seen by them, we're being misunderstood, they don't really, I don't even know that it's about respecting the boundaries. They just don't see the value in why we're showing up in a different way. I think really what we're trying to say is you don't need them to understand for you to continue to do what feels right for you in whatever season that you're in. I mean, that's what I got out of especially these last couple weeks when I was like, I finally said, like, I don't need her to understand how busy I am or the why behind it. It's just a no for me. I cannot promise you anything more than what I'm doing right now. Like, I feel like I'm thriving. I don't feel like I'm burnt out. But the reality is, if I keep putting these expectations on myself to continue in these roles that other people are expecting me to fill, I will be. And that's the boundary. I'm not trying to show up in my life like that today.
Mm.
And I feel like when you're setting that boundary for people who are in that role of overdoing no matter what, not checking in with themselves, like, you know, if they're not willing to look at their parts, like that's not really on me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we need to be okay with that.
So permission to
Whew. Permission to stop performing in a role that no longer serves you.
yeah.
That's it.
I don't know. I feel like also it doesn't always have to make sense. You know, sometimes I can say like, well, my head isn't really aligned with what I'm feeling, right? Like, so it doesn't always have to make sense because your old roles are going to tell you something else, right? They're going to lead you back to, well, this is how it's always been done, right? But if it's feeling dysregulated, if it's feeling uncomfortable, if it's
Yeah.
feeling like out of alignment, then like you have your answer, you know? So baby steps.
Families are hard. It's like no matter what, when you get around that table sometimes, like you're back to being a 13-year-old. Like it does
Totally.
not matter.
It does not matter. Why is that?
It's that inner child that there's it just is a signal. There's some stuff there. It's
Plug
not
for
it doesn't
EMDR?
mean bad things sometimes. It's just like how we show
No.
up, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, feel free to give feedback on roles that you're living in, roles that you want to shed, and how we might be able to support and continue to have topics that align with your growth. Until next time.
Peace.